Desi and the Gora show. The Gora's back with me. Tom, how are we, mate?
Yeah, I'm feeling pretty good after that last half an hour of watching the T20. Thank you, Masood. Hope you're well too.
Yeah, Alhamdulillah, I'm all good. Thanks. Yeah, enjoyed the cricket. So I'm right on my predictions, aren't I? 3-0 to England. So the first one, we've got it done.
It's about the first time you've ever predicted anything that's anything turned out to be anything like accurate. Yeah.
Well, Aman says that I should stop messing about and actually predict properly because he seems to think, my predictions of particularly the Leeds United scores or results have been spot on over the last 2-3 seasons.
Well, put your money where your mouth is then, yeah? Even though you don't bet.
Yes, that's the thing. You've just got that right. I don't bet. I'm a good Muslim. I don't put my money at all anyway because I haven't got any money to put anywhere, unfortunately. Do you know, just on that point, my full name is Masood Tariq Sadiq. The initials are MT. So the emphasis is always MT.
Or money talks.
Yeah, money talks, but I've got nothing there to talk about. So, yeah, good evening. It's a good game. It seems like it was fascinating that England made some changes, brought in the two fast boys in today.
Yeah, I think I didn't hear any of the run up to the game as to what the thinking behind that was, apart from listening to Morgan's post match interview where he referenced Tom Gregory and obviously Mark Wood coming in instead, and he talked about the fact that they try to pick a team for every particular game, bearing in mind the opposition that they know and also the wicket. So on this occasion, it seems as if those think tanks and those strategists have got it right. But for probably 90% of that Australian innings, or maybe 80% of that Australian innings, it didn't look as though it was going to come right.
Yeah, it seemed it, and I was a bit surprised because early on I was in a meeting. Again, we were talking about cricket today, and when Warner and Finch were just hitting England everywhere, I was looking at scoring. It says 3 overs and they were 30 odd for Norton. And we were thinking there's 60 odd for Norton. And then got home and looked at the scorecard, and I got a message which said England won by 2 runs. So I really, really was surprised and I'm pleased as well.
Yeah, it was a very, very strange kind of last half hour because, if anything, Australia were making it look too easy. And England in the field didn't look as though they were really sort of on it in terms of how to take wickets. And then it looked as though Owen Morgan was forced to bring back Archer earlier than he would have liked to have done. But in doing that, he got Finch out, and that obviously, I think as soon as England get a bit of a sniff, they don't kind of let up. They're relentless. He then brought Rashid back, I think again probably earlier than he would have normally done, and Rashid managed to get Maxwell and Smith out in successive overs, and all of a sudden, England's tails were up, and then Wood got Warner out, and then the middle order. Soft underbelly of the Australians just didn't manage to play to any degree of game plan. So, yeah, I mean, I thought Finch's. I don't know whether you saw Finch's post-match interview, but I thought his comments were very, 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 very good. So, whilst obviously they would have preferred to have won the game, and at 110 for no wicket, cruising, they should have easily won the game. But what he was talking about. Was the difference between sometimes getting across the line and not isn't as important as the learnings from not getting across the line. And I think in this case, the Australians will take a lot of positives from their all-round game today.
Yeah, well, I think this is what we were talking about. I mean, Australia probably batted a bit like Pakistan. They've actually done where they were heading on winning the game and then managed to lose from a very strong position here today, it looks like it. And seems like, they've got that Pakistan disease today.
Yeah, maybe. I think I don't know if it's fair to compare the players, let alone the management staff. I know that Justin Langer is he's a very, very calculating, very smart coach who very much wants to be a winner. But equally, I think he's a coach that wants to really challenge his players to learn from every experience, whether it's bat in hand or ball in hand. And I also know Trent Woodhill, who's their sort of assistant coach and batting consultant. I know that he works hard with players about dealing with how their bodies respond to being put under significant pressure. And if you looked at Stoinis when he was facing that last over, he didn't look bothered at all. So the difference between executing and having the right intention sometimes can be, fractions off. And there were 2 balls that he swung at and missed by a fraction, both of which, if he'd have connected with even 50%, would have gone for 6. So he had the right intention, he had the right mindset, he had the right game plan, as they call it, but he just didn't quite manage to execute it. So it was a very, very close run affair.
Do you think that's a mental thing when in that situation, or is there something else to it?
I think it's a huge part of it is mental thing, but I think there's also a process that that kind of changes, but is effectively quite consistent from player to player. The differences are that players' minds and bodies have different physical reactions to being put under pressure. So if you looked at Tom Curran, for example, when he had the ball in hand to bowl that last over, so even after he got hit for 6, which I think was the third ball of, it was either the second or third ball of his final over, he didn't, his body language didn't change. His whole kind of facial expression was exactly the same. The process that the England players around him, the senior players, undertook was exactly the same. So Morgan came up to speak to him, Jordan came up to speak to him, Butler came up to speak to him. So he didn't go into panic mode. He didn't go into, where adrenaline takes over and scrambles your brain and also affects the way in which physiologically your body performs. He just stayed very much in that bubble. And I think nowadays most players at that level in any sport, the amount of practice that they put themselves under in regards to game related situations and pressure related situations, when it comes to the actual game itself, they're almost on autopilot. And I don't think it's a case of them freezing anymore. I think it's just a case of small differences between executing perfectly and not, but having the right intention, the right game plan.
Yeah, it seems like what you just said, that sometimes when you see better football teams, even if in the 96th minute of the injury time they carry on with the same formula, same way of playing, and not panic and not start hitting shots from it. They always say the sides that play well stay as they are, carrying on with the same formula that they do, and usually that achieves the results better than the panic modes.
Yeah, exactly. So we can have a laugh about Aston Villa, but one of the reasons why they were so easy to play against for 95% of last season was because every opponent knew that not just for last season, but for the goodness knows how many previous seasons, their performances in the last 10 minutes of the 90-minute game is probably the worst in four leagues, not just the Premier League. So that means they haven't yet got that formula of being able to deal with pressure in the right way when it comes to the crunch. If you look at top flight professional golfers these days, gone are the days where Jean van der Velde had a 4-shot lead going on to the 18th tee in the British Open, however many years ago it was, and only needed to get a bogey 5 to win the Open, and completely and utterly blew it because he had a total and utter mind freeze. And so those kind of things now in individual and team sports, the value of having a good mind coach is absolutely invaluable. I don't think that happens as much in elite cricket anymore, especially at international level, because I think that they're so well prepared.
You talk about having somebody with mind. Unfortunately, that works if you've got a mind. Some of my Pakistani friends, players, don't have a mind. So how do you control them?
Yeah, well, that's where it's interesting, because not everybody is as coachable as the next person. So tonight, the Sky commentary team were trying to get Peterson to get drawn into slating Maxwell, but he wouldn't. He's a former teammate and colleague and friend of Maxwell. But Maxwell's one of these players who's just, he's got so much belief and confidence in himself. Why wouldn't he go after a ball that was, happened to be Rashid's last ball of his spell if he thought he could hit it for 4 over Morgan's head? The fact that Morgan took a catch, is again difference between maybe 1 or 2 feet to his left or his right or above his head, and he would have probably gone on and won the game. So, I think it does depend on your own personality, your own coachability, and your own approach to learning. And not everyone's the same, of course.
I saw some of the highlights just before I came into the studio. Some of the catches the Australian took were fantastic tonight, and showed that despite the fact that they haven't been playing for a long time, they haven't lost that edge in the field.
No, and Peterson again was very quick to applaud the Australians for their match readiness and the levels of performance both in the field and with the bats that they demonstrated, which up until the last maybe 4 overs was absolutely top level. I didn't see the England innings live, but I've watched the dismissals back on highlights, and every catch was absolutely stunning. But that's another part of the game, particularly in white ball cricket, that has improved beyond all recognition. It wasn't that long ago, maybe 10 years ago, where taking a catch like, say, Finch's one over his shoulder, or Smith on the run, or 1 or 2 of the others would have been the exception rather than the norm. Whereas now you expect them to catch it, and that's because the game's just developed so quickly in the last, or that particular part of the game has developed so quickly in the last few years, and the arrival of specialist fielding coaches and the emphasis on on challenging the players to really come out of their comfort zone and expect them to perform at that level in the field, whether you're number 1 or number 11 in the batting lineup, is first class.
Yeah, so 1 down. First one, we've got it under the belt just by a couple of runs. And we're on to the 3-0. So when's the next one? And do we see England doing well? I mean, Butler played well today. Milan's been in good form again. I've seen he got 66 as well. So I think, do you think the Australians come back, or do we stick to my prediction of 3-0 to England?
Well, you stick to your prediction. I'll stick to mine, which I think was 2-1. So we'll see what happens Sunday. Sunday's not a day. It's not an evening game. It's an afternoon start. So there'll be different conditions. I think it's the same. They're playing every game down at the Rose Bowl. So I don't know whether it's exactly the same wicket, but obviously it's the same ground. But it's an afternoon start as opposed to an evening start. So that might make England think about their selection a little bit. I would quickly like to mention, whilst congratulations to Dawid Malan again for getting man of the match. I think quite often in these T20 games, batsmen get all the plaudits and bowlers don't get anywhere near the credit that they deserve. And I think Rashid should have probably, for me, he would have been my man of the match, because he turned the game on its head by getting Maxwell and Smith out in his last 2 overs. So I would have given it to Rashid.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking at his figures of 2 for 29. I think he was in his 4 overs. You're right. I mean, you only have, as a bowler, you have just 4 overs to make an impact, whereas batsmen obviously can bat as long as they want. If, for example, somebody like Malan comes at the top of the order, or Banton or anybody else, they can bat for 20 overs and make the difference. Whereas, as a bowler, you have only 4 overs, and just to make an impact. So I presume, I actually agree with you that maybe sometimes the bowlers should get more credit, especially if you've got Smith and Maxwell out. You've got the 2 prizes, big prizes from the Australian side.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, looking at the England scorecard, I think Butler got off to an absolute flyer and got 40 odd. Apart from Milan, only Jordan at the end got 18. Nobody else made double figures. So, in that respect, again, well done to Milan, because he is in a rich vein of form, and he top scored and got England, to a reasonable score. But I think by his own admission that they all recognised as a team they were probably 15 runs short of where they aimed to be at halfway. But then credit to the the England bowling lineup, captaincy and teamwork in the field for defending that total, especially when Australia got off to such a fantastic start. So for me, Rashid getting those 2 wickets when he did, brought England right back in the game. If those 2 batsmen, one of those 2 batsmen had stayed in, England would have lost easily, probably with 3 or 4 overs to go.
Well, I shall give Rashid a good call tomorrow and say, thank you very much, lad. You've kept my prediction up. And on that note, thank you very much for tonight. And we shall see you on Sunday again. And hopefully it'll be 2-0 and then we carry on with that.
Look forward to it as always. Thank you very much.
Take care. Thank you, Jonesy. Take care.